Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Gotham Rogues. In this video we take a look at the comic book storyline Batman, Snow and Ice. Rest in peace, Len Wein. He sadly just passed away at age 69. Wein is most famous for creating Wolverine and Swamp Thing, but he also wrote some great Batman stories and did a very underrated run on Batman in the late 70s. All of his Bat comics have been collected in the Tales of the Batman Len Wein hardcover, and I suggest you all pick it up. Especially if you like the more obscure Bat Rogues, as plenty of them make appearances, including Clayface 3, Crazy Quilt, Blockbuster, Signal Man, Sterling Silversmith, and even the Kite Man. Snow and Ice is a two-parter published across Detective Comics 610 and 611 in 1989. The writer was Alan Grant and the penciler was Norm Breyfogle. In it, the Penguin has seemingly died, and a funeral and wake is held, where it's revealed the old bird uses last cash to set up a penguin fund, with the aim to help preserve the penguins of Antarctica. However, this is just part of his master's scheme, as naturally Cobblepot ain't actually dead. While in prison, Mortimer Cadaver, a crazy criminal with a death obsession, overheard the ventriloquist and Scarface plot a major cocaine deal with a mobster named Santini. Cadaver then makes a deal with fellow inmate the Penguin to intercept both the goods and the money. Sending Oswald into a death-like coma using hypnosis, Cadaver is able to get his partner out of prison as a corpse. Later, after the funeral and wake, Pengy's goons, Tony and Knuckles, dig up the old bird and try to wake him with the trigger word, but it doesn't work. Turns out Cadaver tricked them, as he suspected that once Pengy was up and about, he'd ditch his partner and leave him in prison to rot. Now Tony and Knuckles have to bust out Mortimer though, as he's the only one who can wake their boss. Once Cadaver is out and Penguin is back up on his feet, the two unlikely rogues reluctantly team up to pull off the crime of the century, which will net them millions. The only one who can stop them is the man Oswald has been tipping off the entire time with clues. The Batman, of course. So this story is one of the earlier Batman comics I read. As such, it's a very nostalgic classic to me. It's not a perfect story, but still pretty great. Let's talk a bit about Mortimer Cadaver first. I don't want to spend too much time on him, as I am planning to do a forgotten Batman villains video on the guy. Cadaver is a villain obsessed with death, especially his own, as he dreams of dying in a variety of spectacular or gruesome ways. That's a pretty odd theme for a rogue, and it immediately makes the guy memorable. Cadaver has a very theatrical and eccentric personality too, making him a fun and entertaining character to read. What's also very fun is witnessing his team up with Penguin. The two don't trust each other at all, constantly trying to double cross one another. The contrast between them is interesting too. Pengy is rational while Cadaver is a raving lunatic, acting irrationally. However, as the story progressed, we discovered that this may not necessarily be the case, as when Oswald reveals to Mortimer that he's been cluing Batman in on their caper the entire time, Cadaver freaks out. Why would you want to tell the Dark Knight about your crime? Cadaver doesn't really seem that eager to die either when a threat of death gets too real. So you're left wondering, who's really the crazy one here? By the way, I do find it strange though that Cadaver is locked up in Blackgate and not Arkham. What's even weirder is that the ventriloquist isn't sent to Arkham. Seriously, they don't think a guy who takes orders from a doll is crazy? Anyway, let's talk about Pengy. This is the classic Penguin, from before the guy was reimagined as a mob boss. That happened a few years later in the mid-90s. With the launch of DC's post-crisis continuity and comics growing darker and more serious, the creators didn't really know what to do with villains like Riddler and Penguin. They were considered to be camp, and reminded people of the 60s TV show, something which DC wanted to avoid, especially when it came time for the release of Batman 89. This led to these two particular rogues being somewhat ignored for a time. Riddler was portrayed as a total loser villain on the level of Killer Moth, until Dark Knight Dark City revitalized the character. With Penguin, they tried to update the old school version of him by making the guy more deadly and devious. However, it was still the same old Pengers. This obviously failed though, leading to the mobster revamp sometime later. You can also read the fans' opinions at the time in the letter columns of old comics. I've seen several people saying that Oswald just didn't work anymore, no matter how you portrayed him. He was too goofy for the late 80s and early 90s. This story is one of those failed attempts at trying to change that. I completely disagree though. I think it does work, as we get a classic Penguin with all of his iconic trademarks, yet written with respect as a serious character. He's weird, yes, eccentric certainly, but he's not a joke. I've said it before, I prefer the old version of Penguin over the newer gangster depiction. The modern one can definitely work, and there are some great stories utilizing it, but too many feature a boring and drab take on Oswald. It's just more fun when he's portrayed as a theatrical master thief who treats crime as an art form. That's the Penguin of this story, and even outright tells Cadaver that heists should be treated as art, not just as a means for monetary gain. Then there's of course the aspect of Penguin giving Batman clues. He explains that too, saying that what's the fun in crime if nobody knows you did it? Naturally, a master criminal would like to take glory for his achievements. That's great, but I do have one issue with it, and I think you know what it is, especially if you watched the 66 Joker episode I just reviewed. The clues. I don't like Penguin leaving clues. That's supposed to be Eddie's shtick. In older comics, the rogues did often borrow each other's gimmicks though, but at this point in time, that was becoming more rare. Here we have an example of that still being done, and I think Alan Grant could have handled it better. Just have Penguin leave a trademark at every crime scene. That way everyone knows it's him without stealing Nigma's gimmick. It also gives Batman a chance to stop the next crime, as he'd be on the alert, looking for potential future targets of the Penguin. This was done in other comics anyway. As for the artwork, it's like with all of Norm Breyfogle's stories. Gorgeous for the most part. Some of his panels does look kinda ugly, but the good stuff more than makes up for that. I love the way he draws Gotham City, giving it that Tim Burton style gothic look, complete with gargoyles on the buildings and everything. That's how Gotham should look. I also really like how he draws Batman, especially the cape. Breyfogle does some pretty crazy things with the cape, depicting it as extremely long and having it flow into dynamic shapes. It's not realistic, and the cape would probably get caught in something strangling poor bats, but it looks awesome, and that's what's most important with comic book art. It's not supposed to look real, it's supposed to look rad. Although his stuff is a bit flawed, Norm Breyfogle will always be one of my favorite bat artists. So there you have it, that's Snow and Ice. It's not a perfect Penguin story, but still a pretty great one. I do recommend it to those who want to read some more with the character, and it is historically interesting too, as it's one of the last comics to feature the old school version of Pengers. And as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.